Welcome back to the CDL podcast, the post-Florida episode. This one's going to be reacting to some of our predictions from the previous event, as well as the matches for the weekend, new power rankings, which have changed a lot since the last one, roster rumors, and some takeaways. Following this event, I flip-flopped on some of my previous predictions, but we're going to get into it right away, looking at the standings now in the CDL and reacting to the previous home series. So first we're going to take a look quick of the CDL points standings. They shifted a little bit, not really too much, because a few of the top teams like Dallas Empire and Chicago Huntsmen were not playing in this event, but we've got the Atlanta Faze now solely took first place, and every team has 5 events played, so it's not like it was early in the year where it's a little bit uneven because certain teams had one more event played, but they all have 5 events played. So in first with 170 is Atlanta Faze. They gained 50 in Florida, and then second is Empire with 150. They didn't gain anything, obviously not playing. And then Huntsmen with 130. Minnesota, who had a slow weekend, only gained 10 to 110. Then 5 is Florida with 100, who gained 0 this weekend. Paris in 6 with 60, who also gained 0. London tied for 7th with OGLA, both at 50. And OGLA had a pretty good weekend, as we all know. They gained 30 points. And then tied in the 9th spot, 3 teams, the Subliners, Surge, and Ultra, who are all at 40, and Subliners and Ultra obviously gained some points. And then the Gorillas down in the bottom of the barrel with 20, no shocker there. So then right away, we're going to get into the matches that were played. I think, let's see, my predictions were a little bit rocky for this weekend. I think a lot of people's are probably pretty rocky. Some teams like Toronto that nobody expected to make it out, made it out. I obviously didn't predict that. I think I went 2 for 4 on my semifinal teams making it out. Who did I had Faze and Subliners both making it out and playing each other in the final, but they actually played in the semifinal. I thought that OGLA had a chance to make it out, and I had them playing in that knockout match too against London. I had that match predicted right, but I predicted London to win it, and obviously OGLA smoked them 3-0. That didn't happen. And I obviously didn't. I thought Toronto would maybe put up a little bit of a fight, but I thought they'd get 3-1 in both series. So I was clearly wrong about that. They completely proved me wrong and actually showed that they're a pretty solid team that maybe has potential to make a lot of top 4 finishes for the rest of the year. So getting just straight into the matches, we'll go over some of the better matches, kind of skip over some of the ones that weren't as important, just briefly touch on them. We had Toronto and New York. This match shocked me. New York showed great improvement in the last event, so I figured they were going to be able to beat Toronto pretty easily and then play the winner of Florida, Minnesota, and maybe even beat them. But Toronto came out hot and beat them 3-1. Toronto really impressed me this weekend. I moved them up a lot in my power rankings. You'll see that later. But yeah, they beat them 3-1. Not too much to talk about that series. It was a pretty textbook win by Toronto. A couple close maps, but I mean, they pretty much handled business, which was pretty shocking, and they sent Florida down to the knockout match right away. Or not Florida, New York, excuse me. And then the Florida versus Minnesota match was the other match in that group. Minnesota smoked them 3-0. Florida had a really bad showing for their home series. Thank God this wasn't with a bunch of Florida fans actually on land because they didn't win a map. But Minnesota smoked them 3-0. Not too much to talk about with that one either. So then in the knockout match, one in that group, it was the home team for the Florida Home Series, the Mutineers versus the Subliners. And the Subliners were able to take that one 3-0. So Florida did not win a map in their home series. Like I said, thank God it wasn't a land home series. It had been a pretty pathetic showing for your own home series. And then we've got New York moving on to play Minnesota in that knockout match too. But first, in the first qualifier match in the winner's side of this group, there was the Toronto Ultra versus Minnesota Rocker. And in this one, the Toronto Ultra took it 3-1. Another surprise to me because Minnesota, like we've said, consistently has been that kind of 4th best team in the league with a chance to maybe hop up into the 1 or 2 spot in certain tournaments, making the final twice and losing both times. But they've looked like a certainly top 4, if not top 5 team. And sometimes they've looked like a top 2 team, beating Atlanta before and giving up a good fight to them every time they play them, as well as Dallas. But Toronto was able to take them out 3-1. This was a pretty good series, another shocking one. I mean, if you were to say before this event a Toronto versus Minnesota series, I think anybody that wasn't a Toronto fan is picking Minnesota because Minnesota has just been flat out better all year. But Toronto took this one 3-1. And then in the knockout match too, Subliners back against the wall, 3-0 smoked Minnesota to make it out of their group. So Minnesota falls down. So New York makes it out with Toronto. I mean, if you would have said that in a group with Florida and Minnesota, Toronto and New York were going to be making it out about 3 weeks ago, people would have called you crazy, but they were both able to make it out. So New York and Florida came out of that one. No, not New York and Florida, New York and Toronto. Toronto was the winner and New York out of the knockout matches. And then in Group B, this group went about how I predicted it. Except for the teams that made it out. OGLA ended up making out, like I said, they might, but I ended up picking London. But this group went pretty textbook as to what you'd think. Atlanta handled Paris pretty easily, 3-1. And then, like I said, the London Optic match would be a very close one. Two pretty evenly matched teams with Chino coming in, and we'll talk about that a little later. But London was able to take it 3-2. Pretty good series that was. That was a good series, but I mean, the best series we've seen all year happened on that Sunday. The Sunday was absolutely crazy. So then Faze and London get their wins. Knockout match one was Paris Legion versus Optic. I've actually picked Optic to win this one versus Paris. I thought they'd get knocked out of the tournament early, which was kind of a ballsy pick based on the way Optic looked last event. Pretty horrible, but Optic was able to take them out 3-0. Pretty simple and move on. And then we had in the qualifier match between the two winners, it was Faze London, and no shocker, but Faze was able to take them out 3-1, and we'll talk a little bit more about it later. But that was just that match was just weird. It was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in CWL, pre-CWL, CDL, whatever you want to call it. That map one, Scraps was like had a water bottle that didn't match what the broadcast wanted or something, and they made him move it, and then he wasn't there for the start of the match. They started team killing until Faze had like a 100-point lead or whatever, and we'll get into it later, but that's just a weird series that London loses. Who knows, maybe it goes their way if it doesn't happen map one, but pretty unlikely. Faze is just a better team than London. So London gets knocked down into knockout match 2, plays OGLA, where I thought they'd win in a close series. I wouldn't be shocked if OGLA won, I said, but OGLA actually ended up smoking them. I think probably the momentum from that last series just kind of killed London, being that everything that happened, they probably lost full from that. They probably just completely tilted and just off their game, and Optic looked good this weekend and was able to take them out 3-0. So that made Faze and Optic the Group B qualifiers, which isn't too shocking because, I mean, everybody figured Faze was going to come out, and then between Paris, Optic, and London, I mean, it was really just a toss-up because Paris has looked probably the most consistent all year between those three. London was showing improvements, and OGLA had a sub in, so who knows. And then in our semis, we had the winner from Group A, Toronto, versus the knockout match team from Group B, which was OGLA. This was a fantastic series. I remember, I believe this was the first series on Sunday, and I watched all of Sunday, and it was probably the best day of Call of Duty this year, best day in CDL history. The series were insane. We had 2 3-2s and a 3-1, and even the 3-1 was a great series. This series was awesome. I believe Toronto got up 2-1 because they won that Dom by like 1 point off a crazy last second capture on C in a great match. First map was great. Yeah, they got up 2-1 because Optic won that first hardpoint in a really good close game, and then they kind of got blown out in the S&D a little bit. Toronto kind of dominated them, I believe. And then that Game 3 Dom was probably the best game of Dom I've seen all year on Gunrunner, where they just kept tossing the C flag neutral back and forth, and then Toronto was able to slide in last second, cap it, and they got the last tick, gave them a 1-point lead. They won that game, and then I think it was a pretty good hardpoint again in Game 4. OGLA takes them out, and then round 11, Game 5, I believe it was, and Toronto falls to Optic. I know Method said some of the respawns were on him, but I mean, Toronto showed great improvement all weekend. There's nothing to be ashamed of. I mean, round 11s are just a lot of luck based and just who gets that first blood, and OGLA was able to do it in this case, and Toronto falls, but they had a great weekend, nothing to be ashamed of. But this was an insanely good match, and Optic was able to win it 3-2 to go to the final. And then in the other semifinal match, the winner from Group B, Atlanta Faze, versus the knockout team from Group A, the Subliners. This was actually the matchup I picked for the final. Pretty proud that I picked Subliners to get out. I don't think a ton of people did that, but this is the match I picked for the final, and it was another fantastic series. I think it was 2-1 Faze, if I remember correctly, and then Subliners were able to win like a crazy hard point in Game 4. And then the Game 5, everything just kind of turned. I remember the Game 2 S&D was like really crazy because Subliners won that after the Temp Ninja where Priesta didn't see him. I know Priesta said on broadcast that like you didn't see from his POV there was actually a smoke, but for some reason the Codcaster didn't show it. So he couldn't really see Temp on the bomb. That was a crazy swing game. After that, I actually thought that New York was going to win it, and then they went up. I believe they won the Dom actually and went up 2-1. So at that point, I was like, oh my God, New York's actually about to knock out Faze again. Faze is going to not make a final again. They're going to fall short. But Faze was able to regain, come back, and they ended up winning that one 3-2, but once again, just like Toronto, a great showing from New York, a team that was, 3 weeks ago expected to just be done for the year, and they made a roster change with 0 to happy, and they looked awful, and they were expected to just be done, and now all of a sudden they're back in here, and we're talking about them as a kind of an outsider team to potentially win a home series and make some noise. So, a great weekend for them. So then that set up a little bit of a classic final. I know it's not the old Optic that everybody knows as Optic, but it set up the old school classic Advanced Warfare rivalry, Faze versus Optic. And this was a 3-1, the first 3-1 of the day. Both other series were 3-2s, but this was a great 3-1 series. It was super, super tight. I think OGLA wins it if they don't screw up a few times in that S&D game 2. They came out hot, won the first hard point, and then that S&D game 2, not round 11, you know what it was. 18 seconds on the bomb. TJ kind of ego chells Selim, and Selim absolutely rips him off the head glitch for them to lose. He wins that round. They win the game. I believe it was round 11. So yeah, obviously they win the game if he wins that. And they're up 2-0. And I know FaZe wins maps 3 and 4 in that series, but you never know. That could completely change. If OGLA's up 2-0, the momentum might be so in their favor. They may win that game 3, or they may win that game 4. And who knows? They might have won a game 5 if it would have came to that. So I think if OGLA finds a way to not blow that S&D like they did, they had a couple team kills that came up crucial. I think that TJ team-nated Kenny in that round 11 or something too. If that goes their way, OGLA very easily could have won this. So another huge improvement for them this weekend. But the best team that was there, the most consistently good team that was there, Atlanta FaZe, who I predicted to win, ended up winning it. It's not at all in the way I thought they'd win it, with the amount of games they had to play and everything that went down, but they did end up winning it. So no shocker there. Then the next thing, after going over those matches a little bit, I'd like to get into my power rankings a little bit, kind of the shifts that were made. Not too many shifts. We're going to go over where each team is placed, a little bit of explanation why, and kind of like a little tier system that I've developed over the year, like the tier 1 teams, tier 2, tier 3, bottom tier. So we'll go over that quickly. The number 1 team I have is the Dallas Empire. That hasn't changed at all since the last podcast. I do the power rankings on each post podcast, and the top 3 really haven't changed for me. I believe I had, let me look here. I believe I had Dallas at 1, FaZe at 2, and Chicago at 3. Yeah, I did, and that's what I have currently in my power rankings. I know FaZe was able to win it, but they looked a little rocky against a couple teams. Dallas 3-0'd them at the last event in a final. They 3-0'd Chicago, or they 3-1'd FaZe, I think, actually, but they 3-0'd Chicago. They've looked the best online, which is a keyword, online. I think if this were on land still, I'd probably have FaZe 1, Empire 2, Chicago 3 still, because Chicago struggles, but Empire, Shotzi and Illy are absolutely insane online. Obviously, Krim and Clay are still consistently good online, and Hook also a consistently good player, and they're the best team right now. We didn't get to see them this weekend, so it'd be pretty unfair to move them from their number 1 spot. Pretty self-explanatory. FaZe has got to be 2. They won this weekend. They also have 2 event wins along with Dallas. They haven't really shown any weaknesses. Yeah, they've lost in some semifinals, but they've made it out of every group they've been in. They've won 2 tournaments. They lost in a final once. They've been to 3 finals, just as many as Dallas, I believe. They're a great team. They're going to be in there in the end. They're going to be one of the top teams to win champs at the end of the year. They're in that second spot, and I think that's my cutoff for tier 1 right now. I'm a Chicago fan, but I can't put them in tier 1 right now. Now, very easily after this next event, they could win it, and then they're instantly back in tier 1. They maybe even move up to spot 2 or spot 1, depending on how they look, and if they make a roster change that we'll talk about later. But for now, I think I'm going to put Chicago in a tier 2 by themselves, because they could very easily, if their team starts to blow up, shift down to a tier 3, or very easily go back into tier 1. But I think tier 1 right now is Dallas and Atlanta by themselves, and then kind of tier 1B, not even tier 2, because they're just below tier 1B is Huntsmen, because we know with the talent on their team, they're very easily a tier 1 team, but the way they're playing right now, they're more of a tier 2 team, so I'm throwing them in a 1B right now, and the 3 spot. And then number 4, a team that I think I got right last time. I had them in 6. I had them jump from 11 to 6, and now I have them jumping to 4. I put the Subliners at 4. It might be a little weird to put them above teams like Minnesota and Florida, but to me, Florida, they got 6-0 this weekend at their own home series. I thought that team was really weird, and it was kind of a fluke that they won an event. They're still a really good team, but they had to move down. And New York showed a lot of talent at the last event, and then this event, they could have very, very, very easily, with a couple things going their way, been in a final and maybe even won that. So to me, players like Attach and Temp are finally coming around. Accuracy's finally coming around a little bit too. Zuma's been a beast all year, and he's still playing like it. And then Mac is just 100 times better than Zero was for this team. Not saying that Mac's for sure a better player because he hasn't proven anything yet, besides a couple good online events. But in terms of his role and his fit with his team, he's a much better fit than Zero. Obviously, Zero is probably still a better player overall, career-wise and everything. But Mac's shown just a better fit, and it seems like a lot of those amateur players that just play super fast, like a Simp style, a BZ style of play, those super fast, just raw gun skill players, especially in this game and in Black Ops 4 too, those players have just come up and they've played really well. Mac's filling that role, and good for him. I mean, it's going to get him a job for the next probably 2 years minimum just because of how well he's played these few weekends. He's probably going to have a starting spot next year to start the year in whatever we have, Black Ops 5, whatever you want to call it. And then the year after, he's probably got 2 years of starting just because of what he's done, especially if he keeps it up. But I put New York subliners. They're going to be in like that tier 2 because I have 1A is Faze Empire, 1B is Chicago, and then this tier 2 has the subliners. I believe there's 3 teams in this tier 2, and we'll get to those next 2. So number 5, I have Minnesota. I know they struggled this event. They didn't make it out of groups. They did win a series, and they looked solid. They killed Florida, who was the team that was kind of dancing with them at 4 and 5 last week in my power rankings. I think Minnesota dropped 1 spot in my power rankings. Where did I have them? I had them at 4, yeah. So they actually dropped 1 spot from last week, but that's understandable. Last tournament, they didn't make a final. This tournament, they don't make a final. Again, they don't even get out of their group. But to me, they're one of the most consistent teams. They're never going to have a horrible weekend because they play the game so fundamentally correct. I can't see them having a horrible weekend. I also can't see them being the best team in the game ever. So they're kind of in that tier 2 where they have potential to win an event, but they also have potential to maybe only win 1 series on a weekend. So that's why they're going with the subliners. I put the subliners in the same boat. They certainly have potential to win an event, but they haven't shown consistency enough yet. That's why I have New York ahead of Minnesota too. I think they both have potential to win an event, but I think New York has more home run potential, and Minnesota is more just a consistent. They're going to win you a series. They're probably going to get to the semifinal every time, but I don't think they have much of a home run threat, as New York could get red hot on a weekend and be the best team in the game for 1 weekend. Where Minnesota, I think they can be really, really good and win a tournament because of how consistent they are, but I don't know if they can just dominate talent-wise as the best team. And then the last team in that kind of tier 2, since we have a 1A and 1B, is OGLA. I have them at 6. They've jumped all around my power rankings. In my last power rankings, I had them at 10, which they fell from 6 in the ones before, so they've just been jumping all over the place. And we'll get into what I said at the end of that last post-event one. I kind of called out OGLA and said I think they're kind of done for the year if they don't sub out JCap, and they finally subbed them out, and they're definitely not done for the year now. Chino with the vibe change, that changed everything, but we don't want to get into that too much. We'll get into that in a little bit. But I have them as the last team in that tier 2 at number 6 because I kind of want to put them ahead of Minnesota, but we got to give Minnesota some credit with their consistency and OGLA's complete inconsistency. Because 2 events ago, it looked like OGLA was back and they were good and their talent finally shone through. And the next event, they were trash and now they're good again. So Minnesota deserves to stay above them for now, but I put them in the same tier because I think OGLA has a lot more home run potential. A team with Slasher, Dashy, Kenny. I mean, players like that, they have just more home run potential than almost any team in the league, to be honest, because on paper and talent-wise, they might be the most talented team in the league. I put them and Faze and probably Huntsmen on a complete different level of talent-wise. Empire, talent-wise, is obviously right up there, but I don't think they're as talented, complete, just all across all CODs-wise as teams like Huntsmen, Faze, and OGLA. So I think they have more home run potential than Minnesota Rocker to absolutely dominate and be the best team in the game on some random weekend. But once again, Minnesota Rocker gets the nod over them because of consistency. But those 3 teams are all in the same tier. OGLA at 6. And then number 7, this might come as a shocker to a lot of you, and honestly comes as a shocker to me too, because they moved from number 11 in my last power rankings to number 7 now. And this starts a new tier. I think this would be like the tier 3, teams that have maybe outside potential to win an event, but are more going to be like your consistent 1 win, 1 series win a weekend, maybe a semifinal appearance, and maybe the occasional finals appearance, and they're a long shot to win it all, but they have maybe the slightest potential to win it all. And that team's Toronto. A lot of people are probably going to think this is stupid to put them ahead of Florida, but power rankings are mostly based off of where they are right now. Florida just got 6 out at this event. They did not look good at all, and Toronto looked like the most improved team in the game. They were arguably, you could argue, I would say that they were the second worst. I think they were better than LA Guerrillas all year, but you could argue that they were definitely bottom two. I mean, they were for sure bottom three. And then this weekend, they look like a team that could have won the event. I mean, a couple things go their way in that series against OGLA in the semifinal. They're in the final, and who knows what they could do. And they beat some solid teams to get out of their group. I mean, they beat New York, who gave Faze a run for their money in the semis and made it out of the group. They also beat Minnesota Rocker, who we've been consistently saying is the top 4 team in the game. And they were able to put up a really good fight against OGLA, who were red hot this weekend. So I'm moving them up because I think they're a team that is very, very good at S&D. And when you're a team that's very good at S&D and can almost guarantee you're going to win a map 2, you're always going to make the series, obviously, go to at least 4 games winning a map 2. But you're also a solid hardpoint team like they are and a solid dom team like they are. You're going to extend a lot of series to 5 games, and when a series gets to 5 games, they have a lot of players that clutch up, and Cammy is absolutely disgusting. That dude's so good. Metals looks really good. Methods is always a consistently good AR. That team looks really good, and I'm putting them at 7, kind of into tier 3, because I think they have outside potential to make like a lot of semifinals and finals, and I think they're going to be really consistent from here on out now, because they have a guy like Cammy who's an absolute slayer and a great sub player, but they're also really good at S&D, and really good S&D teams like Elevate of BO3, Gen G of last year, they always seem to find a way to just hang in series. And when you hang in series, eventually you're going to get hot in a hard point one weekend, and you're going to screw around like they did this weekend and make another semifinal. And then at number 8 is Florida. This is really low compared to where I had them last week. I think I had them at 5. Yeah, I had them at 5. Not too much to say here. They got 6-0 this weekend, knocked out of the tournament, and they didn't even get beat by like crazy good teams. They got beat by Minnesota, a good team, and New York, another good team who's kind of in that 4 to 6 range too. But if you're supposed to be a top 5 team like people were saying they were prior to this event, you can't get 3-0'd by the other teams that are right in your range. Because I would say going into this event, like Subliners, Rocker, and Florida were kind of all on the same tier for me, kind of those mid-tier with potential to hop up teams. And they got 6-0'd by the other 2 teams in their group, so that drops them down. They very easily could improve and get back up to like a 5 or 6 spot, but right now, to me, I'd be willing to bet on Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago, New York, Minnesota, OGLA, and even Toronto over them. So they dropped to 8, staying in that tier 3 though. And then the last team in my tier 3 would be number 9, London Royal Ravens, team that I'm a little disappointed in. They dropped from my last power rankings. I had them at 8, so not too big of a drop. But I really have been high on this team all year because I think Scraps, Wuskin are great players. Dylan and Jerd have been a big disappointment this year. Jerd's been consistently a top player, if not the top player in Europe for the last how many years? I mean, since I've been watching COD, he's been like the top European player or one of them. Dylan was the best European player last year. He's been a disappointment. Shawnee actually played very well this weekend. He had a couple bad maps, but he played pretty well. This is a team that I have in tier 3 with an outside chance to make some semifinals and maybe somehow win an event some weekend, but I don't see them consistently doing that. But I think they're still a pretty damn good team for being number 9, because I mean, normally when you get down to like the 9 through 12 bottom of a power ranking, if it's 9 out of 12, you're usually not a very good team. But this is a team that I can very easily see. I mean, on the right weekend, I think they could beat Faze or Dallas in a series because they're that talented. Just shows how deep the league is. But they're at number 9. They disappointed me a little bit this weekend. They were able to win a series though. They looked pretty good. I think they're a team that has potential to move up into the number 4 or 5 spot. But I also see them kind of sticking at 9 if they just can't get over the hump of those other top teams. But I don't see them ever being a bottom barrel of the team, because I think they're just consistently going to put up, just kind of like Toronto. They're always going to be in every series that they play. Then starting a new tier, I think the last 3 teams are kind of in tiers of their own. I think like the tier 4, I have number 10, Seattle Surge, a team that showed some potential at the last event, but I don't know if they can beat top teams. But I can see them with the veterans on their team. Whenever they're in an event, you always have to give them a small sliver of hope that they could possibly win an event. So I put them in at number 10 in kind of like a tier 4 of their own, where super slim chance to win an event, but because of the veterans, you have to give them respect. Not too much to say here because they didn't play this past weekend. Number 11, and then in like a tier 5, I think they've dropped now. I think their honeymoon period from the beginning of the year is over. I think now they're kind of a bottom team, Paris Legion. And the reason I don't put them in the same tier as my bottom team, the LA Guerrillas, is because I think, once again, Paris Legion has a really slim chance every weekend to possibly make it out of their group and get to like a semifinal. I don't see too much final potential out of them anymore, but I think they're a solid enough team that if they get hot one weekend, they could make it out of their group, so I put them in tier 5. Then Tier 6, LA Gorillas, number 12. This is just their bottom of the barrel. I don't see them ever making it out of their group unless, obviously, a big roster change comes through because they have a couple talented players like Aqua, Decimate, Blast. So if they were able to maybe make a few roster changes or something, maybe they get out of this. But with their current roster, they're going to stay at number 12. They're kind of just bottom of the barrel. So those are my power rankings. Not too much change. 1, 2, and 3 stayed the same. Subliners jumped up a little bit. Rocker kind of stayed in place. OGLA jumped. Toronto jumped. Florida dropped. London, Seattle, they kind of stayed. Paris dropped. LA Gorillas obviously stayed in 12, where they're going to stay the whole year. And then some potential roster news is kind of what I wanted to get into next. Obviously, there's nothing huge. No huge changes were made. Not too much has been announced from the event this weekend. So there's only like maybe 2 things to talk about with that. The first one to talk about is a potential leak by one of my colleagues that I work with in the CCL, the College COD League. I hold Shift. You probably know him. He casts a lot of like the open bracket events and stuff. I work with him on the CCL, and I saw a clip of him saying that Pristini to Chicago is in the works, just pending league approval or whatever. They bought him out. They traded him. I don't know exactly if they like traded Gunless or if they bought him out, but apparently Pristini to Chicago is in the works. I know I talked about that in the last one, kind of saying that I think that might happen because of Arcides. So if that actually is true, because I saw the CDL Intel page said they had heard nothing about that, so who knows? But I think Shift's a pretty reliable source in the community. I mean, he seems to have enough connections, and I mean, every time I've interacted with him because of the CCL, he seems like reliable, a good guy. So I would think this is probably accurate. And if it's not going to happen, I'm sure he heard it from a reliable source that it was going to happen because it makes sense. But Pristini to Chicago is being mentioned, and I think, like I said last week, I think this is a great move. I don't think Pristini is a better player than Gunless, but to be honest, we've seen that plenty of times in COD. It really doesn't matter who the better player is, because when you're at this level, unless it's like a sensor compared to Gunless, where the gun skill is just completely higher on one player. I mean, Gunless may have a little bit better gun skill than Pristini, but it's decently close, and Pristini is still a really, really great player, a world champ. So at that level, it's almost just more about how you get along with the team and how well you fit with the team. And I think Pristini is an amazing fit. This game is obviously extremely sub-heavy. Gunless isn't really a submachine gun player. He's more of an AR flex type of player. And he's being forced to use a submachine gun on this team because he's got 2 players who are way more AR heavy, like Arcides and Formal. Formal's running the main. Arcides is kind of a flex, and even switched to the main for a little bit. I think Pristini on this team makes them a lot better because Gunless is kind of in between, and Pristini can play a little faster and open up lanes for the team. Scump has never been a guy who likes to be an entry. Envoy is kind of an entry, but he's such a good slayer in this game, you kind of want to let him bait. With how submachine gun heavy this game is, Pristini could be kind of your flying first guy. He's obviously got a lot of chemistry with Arcides, so I think that would work out. Arcides has stated a million times he really wants to play with Pristini again. That was a mistake to let him go, so that makes sense. The branding would be great. I mean, Hecz is always looking at branding, and to have twins on your team, another world champ added to your team, Hecz is going to see that as a great opportunity to brand it like he always looks at content-wise. I think having 3 really good submachine gun players, a guy like Pristini can slide in first, Scump can be kind of the second guy in and bait, and then Envoy can bait them all and just be the slayer on the team, as well as Scump can get out of the role of sliding in first as much, and he can bait Pristini a little bit more like he's used to. So those would be 3 super, super good submachine gun players. And then it seems like Formal is more comfortable in the main this game, even though Arcides or Formal, either of them could be a main. They're both great at it. Then Arcides can be kind of like your second AR on those maps like Hackney, Hardpoint, where teams use a second AR a lot. And he can be like your sub and AR flex. And then Formal can stay in your main. And I think your role changes are your roles make a lot more sense, because Gunless doesn't really make as much sense as a pushing sub, where Pristini can just be absolutely cracked and push and just constantly apply pressure, while Scump and Envoy kind of do the same. And then you'd have 3 fast subs, Scump, Envoy. Pristini can just apply constant pressure, while Arcides is kind of like your in-between gap filler flex guy, and then Formal's your main, one of the greatest mains of all time. And if they decide to role change and Formal becomes the flex and Arcides is the main, same thing applies. You still have 3 aggressive subs in a sub-heavy game, another guy who's a good flex, and then one of the best mains, because, I mean, Formal, Arcides, it doesn't matter who your main is, they're top 4. I mean, it's Octane, it's Slasher, it's Formal, and it's Arcides is your top 4 mains. And then, I mean, my god, based off this last event, maybe Methods is 5. But that's about it. I think Pristini to Chicago, There's a good chance it happens. I think it'd be great if it happened personally. Nothing against Gunless. Gunless is an amazing player. He's a top player every year. But a lot of stuff in COD just comes down to these guys are all decently even in talent. A lot of it just comes down to fits and vibes, and I don't know if the vibes are great with him, especially now that they kind of, it seems like, did him dirty a little bit with the drop. So, I mean, I think picking up Pristini would be a great move. And the other roster type thing I wanted to touch on was, could there be some trades happening soon? There's so many high-profile names on the bench, kind of like the likes we've never seen before. I mean, you've got guys like, I know these two aren't great players, but JCap and Hecz, all-time great winners. I mean, JCap finds himself in the COD Champs final like damn near every year he's been in there, except for last year, which, I mean, I was at Champs last year, and let me tell you, they should have won that match versus United when Apathy just randomly grabbed Slam because he thought they had it won. They win that map, they're going to win the series, and that was game 4. They should have won that series right there, 3-1, and then knocked United down to losers. And I mean, EG would have been in winners final then. They might have won it all. So Cap always finds a way to get into second place in Champs. Come end of the year, he's always on one of the best teams. He's on the bench. Could somebody make a trade for him? Hecz. I know Hecz really, really, really struggled this year, and he consistently always has his name just destroyed. But except for last year, once again, he's 2 years removed from being world champ. I mean, he always seems to find himself on a team that just never goes away and is always annoying and finds their way into top 8 in Champs. He's still on the bench. Zero, another high profile, maybe the best European player or one of them. He's out there. Looney, an all-time great leader, seems to win a tournament in every title to be right there. Brack, breakout player from last year who just all of a sudden hasn't played at all. And then Lacefield and Saints from Gorillas too. They both looked pretty good at the beginning of the year. They're both extremely aggressive subs, which you would think guys like them would easily have a roster spot because all this game is full of his subs that like to fly around the map and get a bunch of kills. And that's the name of the game for Lacefield and Saints. They just love to fly around the map and get kills. So it's kind of shocking that they aren't on a team. So I'm just wondering if there's a lot of trades that could be coming up. These are so many. I mean, every single one of these players besides Brack is a storied veteran with event wins, and I mean, JCap and Hecz have rings. Lacefield and Saints, Looney and Zero are all storied veterans, and Brack was a breakout rookie. So I gotta believe there's some kind of trades coming up soon. And then the last thing we always like to go over to end the podcast and the video out is some of the major takeaways that I kind of took from the weekend. The first one is going to retract my previous statement. 2 post-event videos ago, I said that OGLA is going to take off from here. They had that semifinal appearance. They look so good. I thought the vibes are finally fixed. They had such talent. They finally figured it out. And then the next event, they were absolutely horrible. And I said, never mind. The vibes are chalked. Now I'm going to retract it back, and I'm sticking with this one as long as I keep Chino and don't make a trade or something. I think I was right initially that they could be a top team. I shouldn't have wrote them off last week. I think Chino fixed the vibes, and their talent just finally showed up. I know Dashy tweeted a thing about being like D'Angelo Russell, ice in the veins to Slasher, so maybe they're finally getting along. I know Chino is like known in the community as like the best vibe bringer, and I kind of forget, I guess, how much history he has with this team. I guess he's never played with Dashy or TJ, but I know him and Slasher, I think, like outside of COD, are like actually best friends. In real life, I think they're actually like, or if they're not best friends, they're very close. I know they're extremely close friends. And then for some reason, this kind of slipped my mind. Maybe because it seems like I always forget that Kenny's on Optic, but Kenny and Chino won 2 events together not that long ago. I mean, that was World War II. Last year was BO4, and the year before was World War II. And Kenny and Chino won 2 events together, so they obviously have a lot of chemistry. And it sounded like the team just loved having Chino. He was gassing everybody up the whole weekend. He actually played well. He has obviously got more gun skill than JCap, and I would argue that the brains are up there with JCap because he's a veteran. I mean, he's won events. He's been an MVP. It's not like JCap's a whole lot smarter than him, and then he just brings more gun skill to the table. Slasher was absolute MVP for him this weekend. TJ actually looked a lot better. Dashy was as good as he's been all year with that sub. Chino was a really, really solid second AR and a good sub, a lot better than JCap has been. And then Kenny even also showed a lot of improvement. It seems like Kenny started hot in World War II, and then last year he started slow and was one of the best players by the end of the year. And same thing this year. He started kind of slow and was a little iffy, but now he seems to be one of the better players in the game. So I think that Chino fixed the vibes of this team. The talent finally showed up. As long as they keep Chino, I think they're here to stay as like a top 6 team and could very easily even get to number 1 by the end of the year with the amount of talent they have. Slasher always finds a way. Like he always says, he's Thanos. He's inevitable. He always finds a way to get there. Then I kind of touched on this one, my second takeaway. I have 4 today, but the second one I don't want to get too much into. if Bristini goes to Chicago, he will make them elite again. I think he will make them potentially the number one team again. Not because he's better than Gunless. He's not. I mean, some people might argue he's better than Gunless because of the way he plays the role, but they play very different roles. Gunless is kind of a bait flex that's going to slay for you and play the game right. Be good at search. Pristini's also very good at search, but he's gonna bait for you. He's not gonna bait his teammates. He's gonna slide in first. So they play different roles, but I would argue Gunless is probably a better player. But I think the fit with the team, the vibes going up with Arcides, and just the playstyle of this game with the amount of subs, I think Pristini makes Chicago elite again, maybe the number one team again if he goes there. Then my third takeaway, I said I'd touch on this a little bit again. What happened with London was unacceptable. The ref needs to allow a restart. I mean, you told Scraps that he had like a water bottle or whatever. It needs to be a Mountain Dew Amp Game Fuel water bottle because that's the sponsor. Yeah, whatever. I get that branding. Yeah, you got to do that, whatever. But then when he tells you he's going to get a new water bottle, and then you ask London if they're ready, and they consistently say, no, we're not ready. Scraps isn't here. And then you start the game, and then they start team killing each other to start the map. Obviously, I mean, like, maybe if one team kill happens in like the first hill, it wasn't intentional. But if they start team killing each other off spawn, you know something's wrong. They're begging him to restart. I'm sure Faze wanted them to restart too, like they said, because that's just, I mean, you don't want free wins in a competition like that of that magnitude ever. Maybe if you're just like playing like a GB or something, you'll take a free win. But in a competition of that magnitude, when you're getting paid that much, you want it to be a fair win. You don't want to win off some cheap stuff like that. They've got to allow a restart. That's just so stupid. He told you he was leaving. The whole team said they weren't ready. They started team killing because they wanted to end the map. And then not only do you just not tell them right away that the map's not ending so they can maybe recover from like a 10-point deficit, you wait till it's like 110-0 to say, what are you guys doing? Like, we're not resetting the map. So they just dug themselves a 100-point hole. That's just, I mean, the CDL's got to look into the rest situation. Give me a job. Then my last takeaway, many of you already know this, but I just want to touch on how exciting it is. This is the most competitive league we've ever had. It seems like we say that every year. In Black Ops 3, it was the most competitive league because we had some teams finally able to challenge the AW Optic Dynasty. And then IW, we had the rise of a few more new teams like United, where it seemed to get a little more competitive. And then in World War II, we had random teams winning events and new players coming up. It seemed competitive. And then last year in BO4, we had the United, the Optic, the Hunter T, the Genji, all these top teams, EG even towards the end of the year, Luminosity towards the end of the year, that seemed like they're the most competitive. And I know this might possibly be due to the randomness of this game and the spawns and everything, but still, like I said in my power rankings, I mean, you could argue that there's 10 teams. Obviously, some of them don't have a very good chance, but there are 10 teams. I think Dallas, Atlanta, Chicago, New York, Minnesota, OGLA, Toronto, Florida, London, and Seattle could all win an event. Maybe even Paris. Gorillas, they're trash. They can't win an event. But all 11 of those other teams, you could argue, have a chance to win an event. Obviously, teams like Paris, Seattle, London, Toronto, that's a very low chance. But, I mean, look at Toronto this weekend. They made a run. They were one round. They were round 11, game 5 in the semifinal away from being in a final. So they obviously have the potential to make it to a final. And who knows when you make it to a final? I don't think in a league we've ever been able to see, like, what is that, like 90% of the teams have a chance to win any tournament at any time. That's crazy. And some people might not like that because they might say it's due to the randomness of this game. But, I mean, we can't change the game that we're playing. We've got to take what's given to us. So I think you should just be excited about the fact that this is the most competitive league we've ever seen. Yes, could be the randomness, but it's still really exciting to go into a tournament. Like one of these tournaments coming up is stacked and has like all the top teams in it, but it's really exciting to go into a tournament because I remember in like BO3, he'd go into a tournament and Optic was so dominant and like, yeah, it was fun to watch them win, but it was kind of like, okay, who's Optic going to play in the final this time? Are they going to beat up on Nagafen's Elevate team again? Or are they going to beat up on Rise? Or maybe are they going to play Envy? And then towards the end of the year, it got to like, okay, who's Envy going to play? Are they going to be able to beat Optic? Or is Optic going to take them out? There's always two teams. But now you've kind of got like, okay, Dallas, Faze, Chicago, one of them are going to make it. But you've got teams like OGLA. Are they going to be able to make a run and win it? Or Minnesota or New York? Or you have 6 teams that I believe could win like at any time. And then you got like Toronto, Florida, London, Seattle, who are kind of like outsiders who could maybe win if they get a hot run. I just think that's way more exciting. I'd rather have it be like 10 teams that can win out of 12 than, just a Faze versus Dallas final every single weekend, which, as the year goes on, some of the teams might fall out, but if it keeps going in this trend, if by playoff time, if there's 10 teams that could win it all, that would be the most exciting thing possible. I want to see an unpredictable weekend because I've always loved upsets, and that's why I love champs, is when all the random amateur teams like Singularity from last year make runs. and Sicario with like Chino. I like when those teams make runs, so I think it's cool to have all these teams down the stretch. But that is going to be about it for this episode. I think we're at like 20 something minutes, or actually we're at 40 minutes. Jeez. That's going to be it for this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. We actually, since our last video, we hit new highs and likes on that one for the pre-Florida, and we actually doubled our subscribers that we had. So I just want to thank you guys so much for the support. Be sure to leave your comments. My power rankings were a little bit wonky this week. I moved OGLA way up and New York way up, and I moved probably the most controversial Florida way down and Toronto way up. So be sure to leave your comments on some of my takeaways, if you agree with them, if you disagree with them, just your thoughts. We can have some good debates in the comments and some good conversations. But be sure to keep liking and commenting and subscribing and supporting as we continue to grow. And thank you for all of the support on the last one and the channel overall. And we will see you in the next one for the I believe it is Seattle event.